The UK edition of the Commander Mike podcast. To commemorate the edition, we have the God Save the King in the background to commemorate Tony Wheat. How you doing, Tony?
Very good, thanks, George. How are you?
And I'm also here with Christian Burt from UKHTTC. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, George. Many thanks.
Awesome. And my guy, Big Doug, is typically my co-host. How you doing, Doug?
Good.
That's awesome. So,
Excited
guys,
for this one today.
Yeah, me too. So, these guys I talk to all the time, Tony, Christian, great content creators. I love the fact that they have the passion from the UK. Christian, we'll start off with you. Christian, where are you right now? Like, where in the world are you reporting on the Commanders?
Well, I think you would have heard of where I'm from. It's from London, from the United Kingdom, so capital of the UK. I was born in London 48 years ago, and I'm still here. So
there you go. It's a great place. I had a great time when I visited in 2015. It's an awesome place to hang out. I love it. And Tony, where are you reporting from?
I'm in just outside Dublin, Ireland. So I moved here about 4 years ago. My other half is Irish, so we moved from near to Manchester in the UK. So had to leave.
Okay, well, great. So we're all around the world. And we have Doug from North Carolina and me from DC. So we're looking pretty good.
How far is the distance there from London to Dublin?
It's about an hour flight.
Oh, okay.
So as the crow flies, I don't know. It's probably about, what do you reckon, Christian? About 300 miles, maybe.
Yeah, minimal. Like you say, it'd be one of those flights that goes up in the air and then comes back down pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so,
I fly back to Manchester pretty regularly, and it's a 35-minute flight. So
okay,
not far at all.
So speaking of traveling, I'm always so jealous of you guys over in Europe because everything is so close. You have so many countries that are right next to you. Tony, you and I are good friends on Facebook. Where's this summer? What was the highlight of your trip? What was the best vacation you took this summer? I want to hear about this.
Oh, well, we're recently back from Italy. We went to Lake Garda in the north of Italy. As you say, it's so close. It's like 2.25-hour flight. So we stayed in a beautiful little family-run hotel, nice swimming pool, 50 yards from the lake. And you just take boat trips. So we took a 2-hour boat trip to a place called Limone, which is the home of lemons, where everything smells of lemons. You go the further north you go on the lake, you're going into the Dolomites, I think it is, in Italy, mountain range. So everything gets tall as you go up there. So yeah, it's great. It's a great place. It's just so great food, great people.
That's gorgeous. Christian, you get out of town this summer? What did you do for this holiday?
Yeah, I was in Spain in a place called Estepona, which is near Malaga. Again, amazing place. I've been back about 4 weeks now, and it's pretty much just rained in the UK. So I went from gorgeous sunshine, gorgeous people, gorgeous foods to lots of rain in London. So not every day.
Same in Ireland.
If you drive 4 hours from Montgomery County, George, you end up in West Virginia, not Spain.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right, Doug. So I guess the next logical question is this. I'll start off with you, Christian. So sitting in London boy, born and raised, right? Yeah. Why the Commanders? Why the Redskins? How'd that happen?
Okay, basically, I think Tony's story might be similar, actually, but the American football, and I used to always quote American football, not just NFL. Okay. It was kind of first broadcast in the UK about 1982.
Yeah.
And it was on a channel called Channel 4. At that time, before Channel 4 was launched, we only had 3 channels in the UK. And so basically it was a new channel that was launched. I guess one of its, to make it a bit different, it had the American football. And so from that sort of early time in the 80s, I was kind of allowed to stay up by my mum to watch the games on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I think the Redskins, it just jumped out to me. It certainly must have been. It was more to do with the colours, the logo, etc., rather than, very hazy memories of particular players, because I was only 7, 8 then. So, and I very much immediately fell in love with Washington, with the Redskins as they were now. Mm-hmm. And that stayed with me in the sense of my interest in watching other games. I mean, obviously, I love the game, or why would I watch it at all? But I'm very much Washington focused. Mm-hmm. So if it comes to watching other games, it might be hoping that, Dallas or the Giants, etc., lose, and then I'll watch it. But for a Sunday, for me, it's always just about watching the Commanders now.
Tony, similar story? How's it for you?
Yeah, similar enough. As Christian said there, 82, I think it was, Channel 4 started, and we had a family friend came back from a holiday in the US with a couple of the pennants, the helmet pennants, and one was the Redskins and one was the Cowboys.
You made the right choice.
As the senior brother, I got to choose first. So my rugby club actually in England, our original colours were burgundy, gold, and black. So burgundy gold was a pretty obvious one. It was helpful, obviously, that first season in the UKHTTC was the Super Bowl 17 season. So although I don't really remember that, I don't think I actually watched it live. I've seen it since, but I don't, it was that time, and the Redskins, as were obviously then, for that sort of 10-year period from 82 through to the sort of early to mid 90s, were, as we all know, having a good time.
Yeah, great era. You're just touching on that. So obviously, there was a lot of pride and a lot of growth in that 80s and 90s period there. How is the new ownership and new direction that we have? Has that affected you? Do you guys feel that over in the UK yet? Christian, how about that with Josh Harris taking over at ownership?
Yeah, I mean, basically the pre-season's been about the sale, hasn't it? Really. I think first of all, because it seemed quite drawn out.
Yeah.
And because of that sort of drawn out, I actually thought that when it was going to be official, I'd feel a bit anticlimactic.
Yeah. Me and Doug talked about that.
Yeah, and the sort of day it was announced, I was happy. Obviously, why would you not be? But there was still this kind of slightly, this has gone on for a long time. For me, what really changed in terms of excitement was that press conference.
Yeah.
Josh Harris, I thought Mitchell Rouse particularly was fantastic. Magic Johnson was just, it was like, really? It was a proper goosebump moment. Like, is this actually happening? And I think what changed for me there was, I think initially I was thinking it's just about having an owner who's not Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
And then after that press conference, it just seemed, it felt a lot more than that. I felt that, you've got these guys who are billionaires. They must have seen and done everything. And they were like kids, weren't they? They were like kids at Christmas. They were just so happy to own that team. And I'm just hoping it's going to be a platform for success, really, with these guys. And I think it will be. So.
And George, how great was it to see the owners down there in the stands for game one behind the players? I mean, talk about a complete opposite of what we had before, and I'm sure you guys have seen the video of the game ball to coach. I mean, these are the things we did not get before that are just so simple to do, right? I mean, it's very easy to be excited and a nice person, and it's refreshing, right? I mean, good.
1,000%. Tony, I'll let you jump in on in a second, but from the local perspective, right? So NBC4 is the local TV for the Commanders. So I'm watching this preseason game, and I'm on I'm on my phone, kind of fiddling around on Twitter, kind of reflecting on the game. And JP Finley is just doing a little podcast, little broadcast, talking about the game and reflecting on the highlights. And Josh Harris walks right by him, and JP Finley's like, "Hey, Josh, you want to come over here and talk to me?" And he just walked on up, and he had an interview right on the spot, right? And for the last 24 years, that would be like unimaginable for the insider to do that. So it's just fantastic. I think Christian hit the nail on the head. These guys are enthusiastic. They're happy. They're big fanboys. They love this team. It's just beautiful to see. And Tony, how are you feeling right now with whole ownership in this whole new era?
Yeah, I think Christian summed it up pretty well. I mean, for me, the most exciting day was the day when the sort of the official deal was not the final agreement that the owners did. It was the exclusive deal that was done a couple of months before that, when it was over by the shouting. Then obviously it had to be ratified, and there was always the chance it was going to go wrong. But so when it actually was voted by the owners, I was kind of more just kind of relieved than anything else. I think the ecstasy almost came when the exclusive deal was signed. But I mean, that could just be me. But I think for what it does for me now is that whatever we had before, whatever we did, whenever there were positives, and there weren't always that many, but it still always felt that there was a cap, there was a ceiling that we were never going to be able to break through because of that ownership. And now, as much as we're just, in some ways, it's great to just be just another franchise. We're just another franchise in the sense that we don't have that cap now, that sort of glass ceiling or whatever you want to call it. That whatever we did, I don't think we were ever going to have a sustained success beyond the odd sort of season here and there, because I don't think it was ever going to be allowed to be built in a sustainable way. I think what the new owners are going to do now is build something in a sustainable way.
I agree.
So that's for me, that's what it is. It's exciting to be able to just know that we have the same hopes as everybody else now, because I don't think we did before.
Yeah. And then Christian, real quick, just before we kind of pivot to the preseason games and the kind of the gameplay on the field, I know you, I believe you oversee UKHTTC. It's a writing blog that you put out weekly content. I love the writing that you do. How did that start and how'd you get into that? And who writes for the, plug whatever you want. Who writes for you and how does it go?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was one of those kids that enjoyed writing from quite a young age. I even had a newspaper growing up in the street. Where I grew up. So
I love it.
I thought I might turn out to be like a Citizen Kane, but instead I worked for a registered charity. So, and in the kind of late 90s, I was doing a music fanzine, sort of hip hop, rock, all kinds of things. Anyway, I really after a bit of a gap, I was back into the then Redskins, basically when RG3 came back, and I had a friend who had a website called Uncle Sam Sports.
Okay.
Which covered all kinds of American sports, baseball, NFL, etc. And I sort of covered the Redskins part of that. And after a while, I think it was 2021, I thought, let's just go solo, with my own website, do everything in my own time, get other people involved. So it started in 2021. I've been very lucky to have people like Tony contribute. I think first of all, I felt it was all on me to produce everything, like you perhaps do. And then particularly with Twitter, or X as it's now called, I've met many other UK fans. So people like Tony, we've had like Scott Hartley, who does a podcast as well, Simon Thurston, Josh Edwards, all really good writers, and kind of a step above that sort of, without being rude, some of the sort of NFL UK stuff, the official stuff that comes out is quite middling. So I think it shows that there's plenty of UK writers who can go into a little bit more depth about the teams that they support, they're fans of. So really, I mean, like I say, it's a platform for both UK and USA fans. Sometimes it'd just be me. I might be talking about just lately. It's been like looking at part of the roster. So the most recent one was looking at the O-line, and then we have like kind of round table type topics as well. And Tony's been particularly great for that. So
100%. So I'm going to pivot to Tony real quick, and then Doug and I can ask you some football questions. So first of all, I'm very grateful for Tony. He's another full press coverage brother, and great writer. I really like working with him as well. Tony, watching that preseason game, what were some of the look fors? What were you looking for that game, for game one?
I guess probably some of the obvious things. Everybody wanted to see Sam Howell. Everybody wanted to see the offensive line, and I think coming out of it, those were probably two of the biggest talking points, really. So yeah, I mean, Howell was good. I thought he was solid. Thought he was decisive. I thought he got the ball out quickly. Sometimes he had to, which obviously relates to some of the offensive line issues still. But I think some of the things I wrote about in the last article with Howell, I think we did see some of those things. Some quick sort of drops, some quick throws, a little bit of mobility thrown in there where he converted the third and long into a first down. So I think, I thought he had a very solid game. Nice throw to Dotson, a couple of nice throws to Turner. So yeah, all in all, I think he passed the test well. And the O-line remains a question mark. I think I thought they improved. I thought they started pretty. I mean, I know that the first string offensive line they played for, I think it was 3 series, but clearly didn't have the best of starts. But I think on that last drive began to click a little bit more. A couple of good, good strong carries in the running game as well. So yeah, and then obviously it's some individuals you want to see. Didn't see too much of a couple of guys I was looking at. Really didn't see too much of Jamin Davis. Obviously he's been quiet through camp and he's got his legal issues as well. Didn't see too much of Emmanuel Forbes. Obviously made a nice tackle on the goal line on 4th and goal. So I think we'll see some more of those guys. So yeah, look, it was a solid start. I know the result doesn't matter particularly at this stage. It's more about looking at certain individuals and how the units are. And obviously it's hard to read too much into it because they're only sort of giving you vanilla looks and the very basics of the playbook, sort of offensively and defensively. But I thought for a first hit out, it wasn't bad.
Yep. Go on, Doug.
I was going to say, it definitely gives you, I think, a little idea of what the offense will look like, though. I mean, they were primarily in shotgun. I don't know what the splits are, but I mean, I don't think he was under center very much, if at all.
No.
Lots of short stuff, a lot of passes. I think that's going to we're going to see a lot of that where just because they want to be run heavy, like I think the way offenses work now is kind of changing, so where it's like we want to be able to pass the ball to get a lead and then run the ball to keep that lead. It totally is not the way the game was even 5 years ago. That's definitely where it is now. And so I think you could kind of see what they wanted to do there, rolling the pocket out, getting the ball out of his hands quickly. I think you saw more. It was funny. I was talking with Brandon, I am Burgundy Rant on Twitter. He said,
"Oh yeah,
what's going on with Curtis Samuel? I don't hear anything about him." And you really hadn't heard a lot about him coming out of camp. But I think you saw in the game just a little bit of what they kind of think he can do. Also, George, I was very disappointed that I spent the last week and a half propping my man Bates up.
yeah."
And he dropped all I did was tell everybody that listens to all the podcasts how good he's going to be,
100%.
and how many targets he's going to get. He dropped it, the wide open one. But that was kind of the point I was trying to make, is there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Bates in the offense.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Christian, what are some of your thoughts? What are some position battles that you're interested in, that you're really and catch your eye? What are you thinking about that?
I think from the first for a start, it's preseason, isn't it? So there's how much are we going to see? I was slightly surprised with. It seemed to me that Deshaun Watson could do whatever he wanted against our D line. From that, thinking from the sort of opponent's point of view, I think he's someone who could be talked about in that top 5 QBs, for next season across the entire league. I think Deshaun Watson's one of those real, I think a few people forgot about him, all the issues that were going on, etc. So that's one thing that stood out. I thought in terms of some things are obvious. If there was any lingering doubts between Howe and Jacoby, it's Howe, isn't it? We know that.
Yeah.
I think most of the other battles are a little bit, like for like. Is it going to be Chris Paul? Is it going to be Sadiq Charles? Well, whoever stays healthy, probably. That kind of issue. I think the linebackers, again, it's Cody Barton and Jermaine Davis, isn't it? So one thing that's just, looking at little bits of camp today, perhaps less than that game, people that we see get little niggles, little injuries, they seem to have come up again today, don't they? St. Just, Sam Cosmi. Now, I'm not saying these are big injuries. It's just camp. It could be stingers. Chase Young was another one. That just worries me a little bit, actually. That we have got guys who seems to be the same guys that we go to.
Yeah.
Who pick up these injuries, and it happened again. Certainly Charles again, isn't it? Sadiq Charles, Logan Thomas again out. So I'm a little bit. I don't think personally. I think in terms of your starting players, I think most of the battles are already won. Maybe other than left guard, if I'm being honest there. And I think it's more going to come down to injury and so who starts. You could look at would Fuller start outside of St. Just, because they're probably going to start the first rounder in Forbes. So I'm not sure that compared to maybe some other seasons, we've got quite so many camp battles. And again, each year under Rivera, we seem to have had a different theme about how we're going to go out. I remember the deep ball was last year, wasn't it? And he acquired Vents. I think me and Tony was on the same page about Vents pretty early. And then it seems that there's been a bit of a theme about getting the ball into the hands of the playmakers quickly, which I guess is a little bit linked to Bieniemy as well. And something that I'd imagine Howe can do. But I still think, Howe, it was like Tony said, it was a good outing for Howe, but we're going to have ups and downs with him. He's essentially a rookie, isn't he? So, and he's a rookie. For me, he was taken in, was it the 5th round? And then on the last blog, I talked a little bit about the Giants. Whatever we think of Daniel Jones, the Giants like him. And they invested high round picks to protect him as well, didn't they? Is it Thomas and Neal? And I think Neal. And I think with us and Howe, we took a flyer on Howe. He's not the first or second rounder. We took a flyer on him, and I don't think we took him and have then started to protect him. So let's see, But positional battles, I think I think it's very obvious who's going to start for the Commanders. I don't think there's too many positional battles.
Yeah, it's funny
that left guard spot and the outside corner to me are to your point, are really all that's left. I will continue to say it was only preseason, but I don't think Benjamin St. Just to be playing inside. That's just my opinion. They know more than I do. Certainly, they seem to think he can because they keep putting him there. It's not what I would do. And I know a lot of people got crazy about Quan Martin too, but I think that's a little, it's his first game. He didn't play well, but again, he wasn't the deep safety. He was in the slot, so it's probably more getting used to that more physical nature. That game was more physical than anything he had at Illinois, I assure you that.
100%. And, me and Doug actually had a podcast earlier today talking to a Dallas Cowboy national reporter. And it's so funny how on the national level, they think that the Sam Howell experiment isn't true. They think that Jacoby Brissett's truly going to potentially start this year. And I don't see that by any means. I think we can all agree to that, right? It's Sam Howell's show, right?
Yeah, that's the national press in general. I think I said it in the article I wrote, is that the national media just wouldn't accept the fact that that Howell was going to be the quarterback, and we're just almost as if you said it, almost as if it was either a joke or something that was just coach speak until the preseason and when they were going to roll Brissett out. But the local guys said all along that it's effectively Howell's job to lose, and he doesn't show any signs at the moment. He's really going to have to make a mess of it to lose the job, and he doesn't look like he's going to do that. So yeah, these guys, and then the other end of it is that they say, well, if you're going to start a 5th round pick who's, like you said, one career start, then you're punting on the season basically, and I don't agree with that either. I think you have to look at it from the standpoint of we've had pretty much league worst quarterback play for any number of seasons now. So even 20th, 21st, 22nd best quarterback in the league, which he could do, is probably better than we've had for multiple seasons, Kirk Cousins days. So yeah, as Christian said, I think that Howell's going to have his ups and downs. Any second-year quarterback with one start is going to do that, and I think that it's a real big key for Bieniemy to manage how the offense looks to ensure that Howell is not exposed, particularly if the offensive line isn't going to be a strength.
Let me throw a question to Doug and Christian, because I haven't actually asked you about this, Doug. I'll start off with Doug. So obviously Quan Martin, the second round. I like Quan Martin. I think he's a Swiss Army knife. He has flexible positions. He's essentially like the Bobby McCain replacement, but much more athletic. Do you think it was a missed opportunity in the second round, Doug, to go defensive back again, a double dip in that well, as opposed to going after offensive lineman, or big picture where they're not really any offensive lineman to chase at that point? What do you think, Doug?
Well, I said this when they drafted Forbes in the first round, because I didn't feel comfortable with St. Juice or Fuller in the slot. I was like, man, once they made that pick, they kind of were like needing the nickel. In fact, we have talked a little bit about this. I thought it was going to be Brian Branch, the pick before that from Alabama. I kind of liked in that big nickel role that they like to use. They like Martin's upside as far as athletic profile goes. I think they think his ceiling is higher if they can get it out of him. Well, they thought the same thing about Jamin Davis too.
Yeah.
And they didn't quite get that one right. I like Quan Martin. When I talked to Jim Nagy from the Super Bowl, they were super high on him. He was one of the bigger risers before the draft. But here's the thing. If he doesn't start, think about this. If he doesn't start, let's say, half the games this season, or some kind of snap count that is equal, however you want to put it, chances are the second pick in the draft, the third pick in the draft, fourth, fifth, start running them off. None of them are going to get playing time. Other than Forbes, and that is insane.
It is insane.
You can't have that. And for a coach that's got to win right now is even crazier to me.
I agree.
Tony, I'm going to throw that question over to you. So considering that, there's a lot of kudos to Ron Rivera and a lot of props in regard to the local drafting. I mean, how do you feel about his vision in regard to draft picks and second and third round picks? Was this a successful draft in your opinion, or how do you feel about him?
I just had a slight issue below the second round. I mean, I think in the third and fourth round with the selections of Stromberg and Daniels, they almost out of the gate said these guys are development guys and they're going to take a year or two to bring on. Well, Rivera's not going to have that time in all likelihood, and also there were still some offensive linemen around, if I'm right, in the third round that we could have taken that could have been more sort of, if not plug and play guys, at least guys that could play more soon than some of these guys that have been selected. So I also have a slight issue with this whole thing that Rivera talks about, and it's not just Rivera, it's kind of league-wide around position flexibility. I think position flexibility is important, but I also think, can we not just have the best guard as opposed to the guard that can play a little bit of tackle? And it's just, geez, can we just not have a guy who's good at one position? That's fine by me. He doesn't have to be a guy who can swing to tackle and can always play a bit of center as well. Who cares? You know, I want somebody who can actually plug a position on the offensive line, please.
Christian, Christian, touch on that. How do you feel about position flex and Quan Martin and offensive line play? Like, what are your thoughts on everything here?
I remember when there was that sort of draft day video from the Commanders, and do you remember just how excited Rivera was about Forbes in the first? He was talking about Forbes, you know, just I think he was, you know, driving his car or whatever it was, and he was that excited about Emmanuel Forbes. That to me means if we sort of double dipped with a backfield, you know, defensive back in the second round, they must be pretty high on Quan as well.
Yeah.
Oh, they are.
You know, and look, you know, I'm happy with that. I have no problem with that. I think it might have been Burgundy Blog, who I like. He tweeted the other day, and it was this was only after Quan's less than great first game. Like you say, it's his first game. The physicality of it that Doug touched upon, etc. And for me, and it was sort of mentioned, we could have gone into the O-line in that second round instead. That's not the way I'm looking at it. You know, Washington have neglected the O-line, if you want to call it neglection, for a while now.
Yeah.
You know, they've not gone out and paid a free agent significant dollar. They've not particularly drafted high. You know, we look at Cosmi as perhaps the key piece. Why? He was taken in the second round.
Yeah, draft capital.
He actually came out. I thought he was going to be a tackle, actually. And it'd be interesting if he'd gone to another franchise, whether they would develop him more as a right tackle, perhaps. So no, I have no problems with the double dip into defensive backs. I mean, I think they're going to be a really exciting unit. And I also think there's people who in that backfield who are definitely not on the national radar at all, but we know about. Your Percy Butlers, your Forrest. These are quite dynamic players. You know, I mean, Forrest hits hard, doesn't he? And Butler's sort of all over the field as well. So I don't have a problem with it. I think, you know, we've invested heavily. Interior D line, you've got your first round picks on the outside of the D line. We can't get away from the fact we've neglected the O line, and it's a bigger picture than should we have just taken an O line guy in the second round instead. I don't buy that.
Just on the O line and relate back to the new ownership. It's probably also worth noting that we did trade away the best left tackle in the league, and also let an All Pro right guard go in free agency. Because now, okay, you can argue, you know, they obviously botched the relationship completely with Trent Williams with the medical stuff. And Scherf said he wanted to stay, but did he really? Now, okay, yeah, we don't know the ins and outs of that, but with better management, better ownership, who knows, you know? And you're talking about the best left tackle in the last 10, 15 years in the NFL and an all-pro right guard. So I agree with Christian that we haven't invested as much as we should, but at the same time, you've also got to do a better job of keeping your guys.
Yeah.
Well, and if Cosmi is any piece of Sheriff, who also kind of made that same move, then you feel a little bit better about that pick, and you feel a little bit better about taking all pro guards in the second round. You know, not in the top 10. But listen, I've said this for a while now. That interior line, as defensive tackles get faster and leaner, and as the defensive schemes lean more towards those stunts and rushing forward and getting home with the D tackles and the days of the nose tackle kind of being out, you need more athletic interior offensive linemen. So, I mean, I'm not mad at what they're trying to do as far as being really athletic inside. I as everybody else, I'm not quite sure they got there this year. Now, I'm curious, George, your thoughts here, if we can pivot just a second.
100%.
Is the second round pick insurance because Rivera wasn't sure they'd be paying Cam Curl this year?
I think so. I do.
And how are you on like picking players in case of?
I don't know if I like it. So I think they're trying to be wise and trying to be savvy by getting ahead of it, right? We saw that with Phil Mathis and Deron Payne. They got a defensive tackle to protect that potential contract deal. I think they really liked Quan Martin. I thought that I feel like they liked his upside, like you mentioned. Like he has an athletic profile. If we don't get him in the second round, we're not going to get him because we don't have a third round pick because of the whole Carson Wentz deal. So I think they reached a tiny bit, but I don't like that philosophy. I think you have to aim to win, right? I think you have to aim to kind of win now because it's a very fast-paced league, and if your window's not there, then you're not going to basically hit through that window, right? So I am kind of concerned about that. But ultimately, though, I don't want to bash on Quan Martin because I do think he's going to be a great player.
I do too.
Coming out of Illinois, that Illinois backfield was ridiculous. By the way, they had Devin Witherspoon, they had talk about Quan Martin, they had Sidney Brown as well. I mean, they're just stacked, and basically they had the number one ranked defense in all of NCAA football. By the way, no one in regards to points per game, so they're a very dominant defense. I think Quan Martin just trying to figure it out. And sometimes with those Swiss Army guys, you have to find your niche. I think he's trying to find his niche early on. He only had one preseason game. So I'm not going to throw the pick out the window yet. I think he does have some high potential there. But, it's intriguing because, like, our offensive line has been a concern for years now, or it was a glaring issue last year. Now it's happening again. And even tight ends are kind of iffy. So maybe we could have addressed those. But, we'll see how that goes on.
Quickly, George, before we move from safeties, I thought it was mentioned earlier about Butler, and I completely agree with you there. I think they've got big plans for him and a big role. And we've kind of talked about how they haven't addressed the O-line. They have addressed the back end in the safety room, which was terrible forever. They got a lot of young pieces back there that, like, if there's ever a place you want position flex, it's like in the back end of your secondary. Not at tackle and guard for sure.
100%. They came a long way. We came from our safeties being a deficit for years and years to our safeties potentially being one of the deepest positions in all of our whole team. So that's fantastic. Let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about the Ravens, joint scrimmages this week. Christian, so obviously you're going to be listening to, watching X, not Twitter, and kind of getting some information this week, trying to see like what's coming out of camp. What are you looking for? What do you want to hear from the Ravens Commanders joint practices this week?
I think the first thing I want to hear is an injury report that doesn't contain many Commanders players. So that would be nice. And I know that Rivera and Harbour were really preaching that how they're going to approach this practice. However, these are guys who, these are alpha kind of stud NFL players, aren't they? All of a sudden they're lined up against Baltimore. I'd like you'd want to. I mean, it was said after the Cleveland game that some of the issues on the O-line were technical issues. They were easily remedied. So maybe we might see some of that. They said about Wiley was perhaps, not
he overset on a position. He anticipated an outside rush when it came on the inside. Maybe he could just, his footwork could figure it out. I saw that as well. Yep.
Sure, yeah. And maybe just like be a bit greedy and see another Forbes interception,
Yeah, I mean,
just really to underline why we drafted this guy, see Lamar Jackson float one and up pops Emmanuel. So but yeah, my key thing there would be, I think under the enemy, under Rivera, you do detect that, say, compared to going all the way back to Jay Gruden, I think they hit camp a bit harder. I think having this matchup against Baltimore, I mean, if something bad does happen, all we're going to hear is, why did they decide to have a joint practice? But I think the reward is bigger than the risk. So, I think it's a good approach and hopefully no injuries and see a few more O-line improvements.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the joint practices are going to go a long way. I have that Eric Bieniemy intense mindset, but I think it's really important to have these tough practices because I think coming in and not having taken preseason seriously has led us to have slow starts to begin the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I'm concerned about, like I've noticed is that Washington typically struggles with mobile quarterbacks. So I'm kind of curious about how they're going to be able to handle Lamar Jackson this week and maybe, go into next game. And then I'm also curious, and Doug, I'm going to throw this to you, and I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are. I think it's interesting that the Ravens are going to be watching Sam Howell, for a couple of days in a row, watching how he thinks and watching his mindset, watching him read the defense. They're going to pretty much have like the most amount of tape on Sam Howell going into a game. I'm kind of intrigued to see like how he's going to react to, a live game in regard to that. So like, is there any credence to that, Doug? Or what are you looking for the Ravens, this whole matchup this week?
Well, I think coaches say it all the time. I've heard it in abundance that like this, what they'll get out of these scrimmages is more important than any of the preseason games that they'll play in, because the ones will play against the ones a bunch in these practices and they're going to go for it. So I'm curious I'd be curious to know from somebody that knows better, like how much discussion happens between the two head coaches about how, what we'll do in games and how much we'll prepare and how much, because you still don't want to show a ton.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, they will have the tape to kind of see from practices to see what they're trying to do. Excuse me. But that doesn't mean that, like, come game time, any of that will matter. You know what I mean? Like, that was the one thing I noticed on some of those Deshaun Watson runs. Like, there was no spy at all. Was that done on purpose? Were they just not going to do something like that?
Yeah.
During that portion of the game? Like, will that happen again this week? So, yeah, I'm curious to see how much will they play, because this kind of is the new dress rehearsal game, right? So I mean,
is one less game
to have.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely will be great to see them against one of the top organizations in the league.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
To answer your question, Doug, I know they collaborate on actual sequences of practices. Like, hey, we're going to do specials in the afternoon and offenses in the morning, kind of break down the big learning segments. But I'm curious how much they show in regard to like scheme and playmaking.
Well, like I wonder if beforehand they've already discussed like the other, like against the Browns, right? Like I wonder if they've already discussed what happens if we're at the end of regulation in a tie.
Yeah.
Or like, will we always go for it to not, if we're like at a 1 point.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to kick the point. We'll go for two. So we're not going longer. I wonder if those kind of discussions happen, because I don't know the answer to that.
Gotcha. Tony, same question. So like, how much do you want to see from the players? Like, do you want, how much playing time do you want them to see? What are you looking for this practice and then going into the game?
Yeah, I think from the practice thing, it kind of goes back to what you touched on, George, there with the mobile quarterback thing. Obviously, that there's no more mobile quarterback than Lamar, and in our division, we've got 3 quarterbacks who are all varying degrees of mobile, but they're all mobile. I mean, obviously Jalen Hurts, is probably the best at it. Jones and Dak to a certain degree, but we also play against Josh Allen with the Bills this year. We play the Bears with Justin Fields. So straight away there you've got 2, 4, 6, 7, half the schedule pretty much against mobile quarterbacks. So there may be more I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a bit concerning, and again, you don't want to read too much into the first preseason game, but it was a bit concerning how easily Deshaun Watson slipped out of the pocket a couple of times. Now, as Doug said there, there didn't appear to be a spy. That may have been a conscious thing. That may be something they look at. So, I think that'll be a good opportunity for them to practice against somebody that, a similar kind of player that we'll face during the season. So, I think during the game on the weekend, I just think that certainly offensively, I'd like to see a little bit more of the ground game. I'd like to, I think we ran the ball reasonably well after a slow start. I think obviously there was a lot of short passes, and I think that'll probably continue to develop. I think I'd like to see how we'll continue to be decisive with his reads. But I'd like to see the ball in Brian Robinson's hands a little bit, perhaps Gibson's hands as well. I thought one thing that was interesting, I think it was JOK blew up a screen early on in the first quarter, and I know they've been working hard on the screen game. It was a big feature for Kansas City under Bieniemy, and I think had JOK not made that play, I think there was a little bit of room there for Robinson on the screen. So I'd like to see him try and develop the screen game a little bit.
Yeah.
So, because I suspect that will be a much bigger feature of the offense this year than it was previously, because for whatever reason, it wasn't really a big feature for us before.
I actually rewatched the game film, and the reason why Owusu Koromora got the tackle was because Nick Gates missed the block.
Gates missed him, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully that's something we can kind of remedy for this next game. 2 more questions, fellas. We can start wrapping it up. Christian, we'll start off with you. We'll go around the horn to Doug and Tony as well. A player not named Sam Howell, who is someone that you're watching closely in the next preseason game that you're truly rooting for. This could be a starter that you want them to shine this practice game as well, or it could be say bottom of the team player as well. Like if someone you want to make the roster, who are you looking for, Christian? Start off with that.
Oh, let me think. I'd actually like to. Often we come away from games and we'd like to see a bit more from Jamin Davis.
Yeah.
A game where you could come away and go, yeah, that's that first rounder. That's why we took that linebacker. So a good game from Jamie. Like Tony said earlier, he's got a few issues, hasn't he, off the field as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone like, that linebacker position, we talk often about the O-line, but linebackers, again, it's not an area of strength, is it? Mm-hmm. So a strong game from Jermaine Davis would be something I'd look out for, hopefully.
Okay. Doug, what about you, bud?
I want to see the secondary continue to gel and get rock and rolling. Remember last year, as good as that defense was, and they were really good, top 5, I think, in a lot of metrics, they were at the bottom of the league in turnovers. Another reason why they took those DBs in the first 2 rounds, right? Because they were ball hawks in college and turnover machines.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see that. A little bounce back from Quan Martin would be good for him, like we talked a little bit. And then, they put all their chips into the Wiley basket. And he wasn't great. He wasn't as bad as people said. I mean, I think the O-line, I went back and rewatched too, George. I didn't think the line was quite as bad as maybe I did right after the game was over. Mm-hmm. But like that was one of their 3 big offseason moves, if you want to call it a big offseason move, was Wiley, right? I mean, the offensive coordinator, and Wiley was like from Barton.
Yeah.
So, and interestingly enough, Barton said, we talk about Jamin Davis, but it was Barton that took all the middle linebacker reps. And we talked about that on the podcast last week, right? I mean,
we did.
He came here because they told him it took less money to come to Washington because they told him he'd have the opportunity to wear the green dot. So I think that's fascinating to look at going forward, is how much time does Jamin Davis get if we're going to do a lot of one linebacker sets?
Tony, what about you?
A couple of rookies, but a couple of sort of bottom end of the roster guys. I quite enjoyed a couple of Kazmir Allen's returns on the first game. I thought he looked quick. I thought he looked shifty. There was a potential there. I think the return game for Washington generally has been, obviously a couple of years ago we had DeAndre Carter, didn't we? But last year, really, with Dax Mill, we weren't getting much out of the punt returns. So yeah, I think if he can do that, that might be his kind of passport to the roster. And Chris Rodriguez as well. I thought he ran strongly at the weekend. I think he was a leading rusher in the game overall, which obviously isn't as relevant as in a regular season game. But I thought he ran strongly. And then lastly, really, Cole Turner, because I think Cole Turner could have a real impact this year. He certainly 3 or 4 catches on the weekend there. We don't know fully the status of Logan Thomas. Hopefully it's nothing too serious, but you never know. So I think Cole Turner, particularly during the season, might get a lot more action. So a few guys to watch.
I'm definitely stealing the passport to the roster.
I love that. That's a European perspective. I like that. It's very, very nice. Let's do one more question for both Tony and Christian, and one more question for Christian specifically, because I have a Crystal Palace question for you, if you can answer that for me. All right.
I'll try my best, yeah.
So last question for Tony, and I'll start off with Tony and then go back to Christian. In regard to season outlook and season projection, how confident are you in the team this year?
I think that we can be a playoff team. I think it may be a wild card. I think it's going to be a tough call to overcome Philly and/or Dallas. I think on paper certainly Philadelphia's got the best roster in the NFC. San Francisco may argue, but and Dallas obviously were ahead of us last year, even though obviously the last game of the season, it was a commanding victory. Sorry. Commanding victory.
A little pun right there, I like it.
Yeah, no pun intended. But yeah, I think the finishing record of 7-10 last year could, with a little bit more luck, have been 9-8, 10-7. And I think with better quarterback play, which is not guaranteed but is likely because it could have been a great deal worse. The difference between 7-10 and 10-7 in the NFL is very, very slim. And I don't think that it will take. I think it will take the defense to play as well as they did last year. So I think a top 5, top 10 defense combined with a average offense will probably be enough to sneak into wildcard contention.
Okay, so wildcard contention. Christian, what about you?
I was feeling relatively positive until Tony mentioned all the mobile quarterbacks we're going up against.
Yeah.
And how that's on Achilles heel. And I'm slowly thinking, I think what might be interesting, particularly now we've got Harris and the Harris group on board. You do see other teams who become successful, who if they're having, I mean, this is me projecting a bad season, which I don't want to do, but say we're not doing so good.
Yeah.
We're in that kind of like, free win kind of, it's not going to happen, but do we start to look at some of our assets and look at trading?
Yeah.
I remember it was a few years ago, Miami starting to do that, threadbare roster, got the quarterback and sort of built that way. But in terms of the actual, which, it's just going to be a different approach from, what we had with Snyder, where really we just continue to be a very middle type team, occasionally an NFC title around that. Well, apart from the RG3, was it 10-6 season?
Yeah.
When we win, it's like, 9-8, something like that.
Exactly.
I think our record's probably going to be around 8 wins, maybe 9. You got to be worried about, as much as I think how could be the future. It's still essentially a rookie season, and it's essentially a rookie season behind the line, which we know has got some issues.
Yeah.
So I'd say around about that. I think 9 wins would be generous. Maybe 8 is more likely. But we have got better though. I think Tony's right. We've the quarterback play we've had. I mean, and in a worse scenario as well, either injury, hopefully not, or Sam just not looking great. Jacoby's good.
Yeah.
I done a little Q&A. Yeah, I had a little Q&A with a Cleveland fan, and I mean, obviously Deshaun was just feeling his way back in. I don't know why I done a very bad quarterback motion there, but and he actually thought Jacoby was better in many ways than Watson last season. So I think we've got an excellent backup. But like I say, I think overall the roster, it's around that 8-9 wins.
I like that tempered approach. I think that's the way to take it. I think we're starting from the ground up. We'll see how Josh Harris projects and kind of builds the team. I like what you mentioned about his foresight, potentially selling at the trade deadline to get more assets and building up, because he's done that before. He's done that in Philadelphia. He's done that in New Jersey. And actually, that's what I was going to ask you about Crystal Palace. I know it's a soccer-based team based in London. You can tell me you have no idea. It's okay if you don't know the answer to this, but what's the aura around him in London? Like, what is Josh Harris even a central figure in that team? Like, do people think of him negatively, highly? What's the perspective on that?
I've got I don't support Crystal Palace myself, but being based in South London, I've got many friends who do. I actually done a little piece on the blog on Josh Harris, actually speaking to a Crystal Palace fan. Okay. I think he owns about 17% of Crystal Palace, something like that. I think he's solid. I don't think he particularly is hands-on with Palace. I think they've got a number of American investors there. Investors. Sorry, I do not think there's a negative vibe about Josh Harris from Crystal Palace fans. Maybe some of them are thinking, quite rightly, if he's gone and bought the Washington Commanders, is all his interest going to be over back in the States, being a fan as well. But no, I haven't seen anything negative about Harris. I think sometimes with Crystal Palace, they're a sort of slightly lower tier Premier League team compared to your obvious, like your Liverpool, Chelsea's, Man United, etc. I won't say Tottenham because Andy Burrow supports Tottenham, so they're kind of lower tier as well.
They'll be a championship team next year.
Exactly, yeah. So no real negative vibe, but they see him for who he is. He's an investor at Crystal Palace, probably looking to get a return, but someone who's knowledgeable and well connected.
Gotcha. Yeah. Doug, any last minute questions for the boys?
No, I loved it. I thought this was great.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Before we sign off, I guess Christian, Tony, talk about like where they can find you on socials, what products you're working on, kind of fill everyone in.
Go on, Tony. You go first.
I was just trying to remember my Twitter address. It's at TonyJWeek10 on X, as it is now. I think I'll try and get something together for Full Press Commanders before the start of the season. I'll have a chat to George and we'll come up with something, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
Christian, how about you? Very straightforward. It's just my name, so it's at Christian Burt, Burt, and there's links to the blog on my sort of X profile as well. So yeah.
All right, cool. And you guys know Big Doug. Thank you for listening to the show. I appreciate you guys. See you next week. All right, bye. Take care.